Every time I brought it up, he laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Something almost worse. The laugh of a man who is completely certain you can't prove anything. He called me paranoid. He called me insecure. He sat across from me at our dinner table and looked me in the eye and said, "You need help, Rachel." And I almost believed him. Almost. Because I had been hearing it for 2 years, and I was tired, and I was starting to wonder if the problem really was me. And then, one afternoon, I found a single dark hair on the collar of a shirt I had just laundered, and I stopped wondering. My name is Rachel, and the man who spent 2 years calling me crazy handed me exactly what I needed. To prove I wasn't, I need to take you back, not to the hair on the collar, further back, to the woman I was before any of this happened, because that woman matters. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, the youngest of 3 daughters, in a family that was loud and close and honest, in the way that families are honest when they've decided that truth is less expensive than pretense. My mother was a high school English teacher. My father ran a small accounting firm. They had been married for 31 years. When I got married, what their marriage showed me was that 2 people could choose each other every day without it becoming a performance. That was what I wanted. That was what I thought I had found. His name is Brian. We met at 28 at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, and he was quiet and steady in a way that I found genuinely attractive. Not flashy, not performing, just present, interested in what you're saying, remembering it later, following up. We dated for 2 years. We got married when I was 30. We bought a house in a suburb outside of Portland when I was 32. A 4-bedroom with a yard, and the specific feeling of a life. Exactly where it's supposed to be. Brian worked in civil engineering. He traveled periodically for projects, site visits, client meetings, the normal rhythm of a job that required other cities sometimes. I worked as a physical therapist, clinic-based, predictable hours, home by 6. We had a good life. I want to say that clearly. The early years of my marriage were genuinely good. Not perfect, but real. The shift happened in year 5. I can identify it now with the clarity of hindsight. At the time, I felt it as a general loosening, something becoming less solid, less present, less mine, without being able to name the cause. Brian's travel increased. The reasons were reasonable. Seattle, then Sacramento, then a long-running engagement in Denver, almost every other week for 8 months. I noticed Brian had changed his phone password, without mentioning it. I noticed he had started taking his phone to the bathroom at night. I noticed certain calls while traveling were taken outside, away from the hotel room, at hours that seemed odd for work. I noticed his attention when he came home, present physically, elsewhere in a way I felt but couldn't document. I mentioned it. The first time carefully, Brian's response was immediate and confident. He said I was imagining things. He said travel was stressful, and I was interpreting tiredness as distance. He said he loved me, and I had nothing to worry about, and that if I kept bringing it up, it was going to feel like an accusation he hadn't earned. I backed down. The first time, because that's what you do when you love someone, and you want to believe them, and the alternative is something you're not ready to face. The second time I brought it up, 8 months later, was more direct. I had specific things to point to by then. A charge on a credit card for a restaurant in Denver. On a night Brian had told me he was working late with his team. A restaurant 30 minutes from the office. Not the kind of place you went with a team. I showed him the statement. He had an explanation, detailed and plausible, and I couldn't immediately disprove it. He told me I was looking for problems because I was insecure. He said my behavior was going to damage our marriage. He said if I didn't trust him, then we had a bigger problem than a restaurant receipt. I backed down again. I want to be honest about that, because the honest version of this story is more useful than the flattering one. 2 years of being told I was imagining things had done something to my confidence. In my own perception, that is the specific damage of being called crazy by someone you love. It works. Not forever, but for a while. It works. The hair on the collar was on a Thursday afternoon. In November, Brian had been in Denver the previous week. I was doing laundry. I was transferring shirts from the washer to the dryer, and I found it in the collar of a white dress shirt. Dark brown. Long. Mine is short and red. I held it in my fingers for a moment, and then I put it in a small plastic bag that I sealed and labeled, and put in the back of my dresser drawer. I didn't confront him. I had learned the cost of confronting without proof. What I had was a hair in a bag. What I needed was something that couldn't be explained away. I started planning the same way I approach difficult cases at work, methodically, without emotion, interfering with the methodology. The first thing I did was find an attorney, not a divorce attorney yet, a family law attorney who could give me a clear picture of my legal position. Her name was Christine Walsh. She had been practicing family law in Oregon for 22 years. I told her everything in that first meeting. Christine listened, and then she said, "Rachel, in Oregon, marital fault has limited impact on divorce proceedings. What matters most is financial documentation and asset accounting. What you need is not proof of infidelity. For emotional reasons, it's proof that is relevant to the financial picture of your marriage." The second thing I did was hire an investigator. Christine referred me to a woman named Diane, who was experienced and discreet, and who charged appropriately for both. I told Diane what I knew and what I suspected. She told me what she could realistically find, and on what timeline. We agreed on a scope, and I paid a retainer. And then I went home, and I made dinner, and I sat at the table with Brian, and I asked him about his day. I did that for 11 weeks. Came home, made dinner, asked about his day, listened to the answers, watched his face, said nothing about what I was building. The third thing I did was my own financial audit. I went through 4 years of statements, credit cards, bank accounts, investment accounts, with the thoroughness of someone who grew up watching her father run an accounting firm. What I found was not criminal, but it was a pattern. Charges in cities Brian had been in, amounts consistent with dinners for 2 rather than 1, hotel upgrades and room service charges, on nights when the stated purpose of the trip was a day meeting followed by an early morning flight. None of it proved anything individually. Together it told a story. I documented everything, organized, dated, printed, filed. Diane's report came in at the 10-week mark. I am not going to describe its contents in detail, because some of what it contained belongs to a level of private pain I am not going to perform for anyone. What I will tell you is that it was thorough, it was documented, and it was not a surprise. I also sent the hair to a private DNA testing lab that Christine had used before. The process took 3 weeks and cost $400. The results came back on a Tuesday. The hair from the collar was not mine. The DNA profile did not match Brian's. It belonged to a third person, female, unknown to the database, which meant I couldn't identify her from it. But it was documented, dated, sealed, real. Now I need to stop right here, because what Christine and I did with everything I had built, the statements, Diane's report, the DNA results, is the part of this story that changed everything. If you haven't subscribed to US Story Nation yet, hit that button right now and ring that bell, because what I walked into that counselor's office with is something Brian never prepared for. Brian had suggested marriage counseling 3 months earlier. His suggestion, not mine. I think he believed counseling would serve the same purpose his other tactics had served. A controlled environment where my concerns could be managed and redirected, where the narrative of Rachel is the problem could be reinforced by a professional third party. I agreed to counseling because Christine had told me that documented evidence of good faith efforts at reconciliation was useful in proceedings. We went 4 times. Each session, Brian was measured and articulate. He described our marriage's difficulties in terms of my anxiety, my insecurity, my need for reassurance that he found exhausting. He was good at it. The counselor did not take sides, but I could see her listening carefully to both versions. And I could see that Brian's version was smooth, in a way that comes from rehearsal. The 5th session was the one I had prepared for. I brought a folder. Brian saw me bring it in. He looked at it and then looked at me. And I saw something move across his face that I hadn't seen in 2 years of confrontations, something that wasn't quite sure of itself. I set the folder on the cushion next to me, and I didn't open it immediately. I let the session begin the way the others had. I let Brian say what he usually said. I let the counselor ask her questions. And then I opened the folder. I presented, calmly and in order, the financial documentation, Diane's report, and the DNA results. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I had spent 4 months making sure I wouldn't need to do either of those things, because I had something better than emotion. I had evidence. Brian denied it. Then he questioned Diane's methodology. Then he questioned the DNA results. Then he went quiet, the way that people go quiet when the last explanation has been used, and there are no more. The counselor looked at the documents. She looked at Brian. She looked at me, and she said, very quietly, I think this session needs to end here. I think both of you need to speak with your attorneys. I looked at Brian across that room, and I thought about every dinner table conversation where he had left, every time he had called me paranoid, every time he had said I needed help, said it with such confidence that I had almost gone to find out if he was right. I thought about 2 years of collecting the slow damage of being told your own perception can't be trusted. And I thought about a Thursday afternoon in November and a single dark hair in a plastic bag. In my dresser drawer, I said, my attorney's name is Christine Walsh. You'll be hearing from her. I filed for divorce the following Monday. The proceedings took 8 months. Oregon's laws meant that infidelity did not directly affect the financial settlement, as Christine had explained, but the financial documentation I had assembled, the charges, the patterns, the accounting of marital funds used in ways that benefited his other relationship, was relevant to asset division. In ways that Christine navigated expertly, the settlement reflected a careful and complete accounting of our marital finances. Christine's 22 years were worth every dollar of her fee. Brian and Melissa are not together. I found this out through a mutual acquaintance, not through any effort of my own. I don't know the specifics, and I don't particularly need to. I want to tell you about the evening after the divorce was finalized. I drove home to the house, my house now, bought out of the settlement, the one with the yard, and the neighborhood full of kids, and the specific feeling of a life. That is exactly where it's supposed to be. I made dinner for one. I sat at the table that had been the site of 2 years of dismissal, and I ate, and I thought about the distance between the woman who had almost believed she was imagining things and the woman sitting in that chair. What closed that distance was not one dramatic moment. It was 4 months of Tuesday evenings, organizing folders. It was a woman named Christine who told me clearly what I needed to know. It was a woman named Diane who did her job without judgment. It was a plastic bag in a dresser drawer that I had the presence of mind to seal and label instead of throw away. It was the daughter of an accountant who had been taught since childhood to document and keep records and trust the numbers, even when the people around her were telling her the numbers were wrong. He called me crazy for suspecting him, and I collected proof so carefully, so completely, so patiently, that by the time I set it on a cushion in a counselor's office, there was nothing left to call me. Here is what I want to say to anyone watching this, who is in the middle of being told that what they see isn't real. Your perception is yours. No one gets to take it from you, no matter how confidently they try. No matter how many times they repeat it, no matter how tired you get of defending it, what you see is what you see. And if you see something, document it. Not because documentation is more important than your experience, but because documentation is what turns your experience into something no one can argue with. You are not crazy. You are just not finished yet. Tell me in the comments if someone ever tried to make you doubt yourself and what you did about it. Subscribe to US Story Nation for more stories. I'll see you in the next one.